Hello and welcome to the Answer Yes podcast. Thank you for tuning in. I'm in the fortunate position to meet a lot of people in my networks. I'm a part of the Lion's Den, I'm a part of the Arte Syndicate, and I've got a couple of my own syndicates that I've started recently. And, it's just great in this post-COVID era. We've all learned to be on Zoom, meet great people, get involved in different ways, and we don't necessarily have to be in the same hometown as them. And that is what's so wonderful about technology today. I have Alex Urban on the phone today. How are you?
Good, good. How are you, my man?
I'm good. I got to say it's all about the people behind the people. And I don't want to put you behind somebody, but dude, you have done some incredible things for Lions Not Sheep.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, no, it's been such a great journey, great adventure. Probably one of the best business partnerships that I've had throughout my entire career. So we work very well in sync with each other, me and Sean Whalen. So I'm very excited that he gave me the platform to grow and the opportunity to grow with him with this brand because it's definitely something that's going to change the world. So very excited to be a part of it for sure.
Yeah, I love that. I think back in my careers, different companies I've worked for, and there's always been somebody right by my side that has elevated me and made me the best that I could be. And then, of course, I feel like I've been that for somebody else when I work for these companies. So there's a tremendous amount of value in that. I know you've got your own business on top of what you're doing for Lions Not Sheep, and I want to talk about that. But let's hear a little background on you as a person. Where did life start for you in business? Were you always an entrepreneur? Were you the kid selling gum on the school playground like I was? I mean, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Alex. I grew up here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Fresh out of high school, I was like kind of very lost with where I wanted to be in life. I barely passed high school. Everybody's telling me, hey, go to college, go get an education, go get a degree, blah, blah, blah. And I never really found anything I was passionate about. And that's why I practically failed high school. And so I just kind of figured that, any kind of further education for that for me, unless it was something that I was very passionate about, just didn't really align with it. So kind of just put my trust in the universe. And that's something that I've done multiple times. And I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. But right out of high school, I was working at a bakery, and I remember my boss at the time was like all excited, goes, "Hey man, I got you a paycheck. We got you a raise. Really excited to give it to you." And I'm like, cool, getting all hyped up. That time I was making minimum wage, 7.25 an hour. And he literally like came up to me, showed me the paycheck, and it said 7.50 an hour. And he goes, "If you work hard, you'll get this raise every single quarter." And I'm like doing the math in my head at that point. I'm like, so if I work, 40 hours a week, by an extra 25 cents, like in all reality you're paying me an extra $10 a week, like that, you know what I mean? I'm like, that's not going to get me anywhere in life.
Yeah.
And at that time I just bought like my first car, and I was trying to deck it out with like stereo and all the stuff that you do as a teenager. And it was like, I'm trying to do the math in my head, I'm like, I want a $3,000 stereo system. I'm like sitting here, I'm like, that's a lot of hours to work, and that's not even accounting for my daily expenses, my bills, food, whatever it is. So at that point, I literally was just like, I walked in a few days later and I was like, I quit, man. I'm like, I want to work on stuff bigger or bigger things. And then from there, I went to Vegas with my friend for the weekend. We went to like a supercross show or something like that. Literally spent all of the money I had left in my name with my last check there. And I was just kind of like, I have no idea what I wanted to do. So at that point, my mom had a friend who worked in the HR department of this mortgage company. I've never even heard the word mortgage in my life. So she's like, hey, this could be a great opportunity for you. Let's go ahead and get you in there. So I went into the interview, just kind of talk some shit with the guy about golfing. And then he's like, cool, we'll hire you on as like an assistant to a loan officer. And I'm like, cool, sounds good. What's the pay? He's like, you'll make $9 an hour. Plus you'll get $50 for every loan that you help close. And I'm kind of like racking that up in my head. I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Fast forward a little bit, I started working under one of the highest producing loan officers in the company. And then from there, I started seeing, oh, I got a commission check for an additional $3,000, additional $4,000. And I was just cranking, man. Like I was like pushing hard and hard and harder, because I started to see that this is a position that I aligned myself that the harder I worked, the more money that I could make.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of fast forward to a point where I started making a decent amount of money, finally got my own place. And then from there, I was like, how much does a loan officer make? And I started getting really curious. So I started asking kind of the questions and I was like, holy shit, like that's actually quite a bit. You know, I mean, you close a loan, you can make anywhere from, $1,000 to $6,000, at least on the commission rates that I was at that point. And so I decided to go get licensed as a loan officer, just again, kind of put my trust in the universe. I'm like, I think I know enough about this. Well, when you take your test to be a loan officer, you only have 3 chances to pass. And then after that, you have to wait like, I think it's 6 months or a year to take it again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I failed the first 2 times. And the third time I passed it by one question. I was like, yes, this is going to change my life. It's going to change everything. Really, really cool. Right. Well, I got my loan officer license. I started doing loans. 19 years old, I broke 6 figures. I made $148,000 at 19 years old as a loan officer. And that was like absolutely huge for me. Like having a 6 figure, tax form coming at the end of the year was just like absolutely mind blowing. Right. Well, fast forward about another 2 years or so into mortgages. I remember one day I was literally sitting there in my cubicle, listening to the phone ring, look at that horrible gray fabric on the cubicle wall. And I was like, this ain't it anymore. Like this is boring. I'm like, this is literally my definition of living in hell, is sitting here at this cubicle, listening to all these clients kind of moan and complain about stuff that the underwriters and the processors are doing. And then I'm kind of the point of blame because I'm the one who actually talks to the customer. And you know what I mean? It was like starting to slow down. So I'm like, I don't want to cold call. I don't want to do this. And so I was like, I need to find something that's different.
But Alex, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you were making good money, right? At the time?
Yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
was making really good money. I mean, I was at the point where I quit, I was probably making, about like $80,000 or so a year. I really hit kind of a spike earlier on because like the rates were so good, but it's like when you're working and dealing with refinances, when you put everybody at like, let's say a 2.75% fixed rate on a 30-year loan, for a VA mortgage at that time, that was really, really good. And then all of a sudden they jump up to like 3.75. It's a little bit harder to do business at that point. You know what I mean? You kind of got to shift and adjust, and just, it was kind of turned into a pain. So at that point, I realized that I'm probably one of the hardest and laziest workers that you've ever met in your entire life. So instead of cold calling, I started looking at ways of like, how can I reach more people by doing less action, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I started getting into like blasting out email campaigns. I started getting into like I found softwares where you could call like 2,000 numbers at once and leave everybody a voicemail at the same time. So like I started finding ways to kind of automate that, and that's kind of where marketing started to come into my life. Fast forward to that day where I kind of had that realization, I'm like, this just isn't for me anymore. I started looking around at what I wanted to do. And at that point, there was a guy I was following online. His name is Ty Lopez. And he had a social media marketing course. And he's like, look, you can work anywhere in the world from your laptop. All you got to do is get a few clients. You charge $3,000, $4,000 or $5,000 a client. You work with 4 or 5 of them. It's kind of some part-time work. You can get into that. And I'm like, cool, let's do it. So I literally took my last paycheck that I had at the mortgage company and spent it to go to a mastermind at this internet marketing. They called it Internet Marketing College. It was called Techademics. So I went to a mastermind down there, literally spent my last money to go down to Arizona and go to that mastermind where they talked about building Shopify stores, running your agency, all that kind of stuff. So I went down there. And at that point, it was really, really interesting. There was a kid down there, and I met him through social media and everything like that. And I remember I drove down there with my parents' camper, and I was literally sleeping in the parking lot, cause I was just I don't really have money to play with at this point. You know what I mean? Everything's been invested at this point, or everything's been dumped into courses and just trying to figure everything out. Well, there's this kid down there that I met, and I knew that he was into hiking. So I'm like, let's go hiking. And he's like, okay, yeah, I'm down. You know what I mean? I'm in here for the weekend. So we went hiking, and then long story short, went to this place. They called it the Marketer's Mansion. They branded it as, and there's a bunch of guys who are running some very successful e-commerce stores. And he's like, dude, I think we can go to the Marketer's Mansion tonight. And I'm like, cool, sounds good. So we went over there. Long story short, I met a guy there named Jonathan Fultz, who then I started talking to. We really started connecting together well. It went very well. And then I met another guy who actually lined me up to get an interview at Techademics to go work for them. And I'm like, well, if I'm trying to learn internet marketing, e-commerce, everything like that, what better way to do that than actually work for a company that literally sells education to all these very successful entrepreneurs?
Right.
So I went in to go get an interview there. And it was so funny because the kid was supposed to help me get into the interview with this guy. They didn't even know I had an interview, but he's like, dude, I'll get you in with the manager. You can talk shop, see if we can get you in. I know they're looking to hire, blah, blah, blah. Well, I sat in the parking lot for 45 minutes, blowing this kid's phone up, and he's nowhere to be found, completely MIA. And so I was like, all right, this just isn't meant to be, whatever. So I literally go back, I rehitch the camper on my truck, start driving back home to Utah. And I was about 30 minutes or so on the freeway. And then all of a sudden he sends me a text and he's like, hey man, did you have an interview with Michael? And I was like, no, you didn't answer, you didn't show up or whatever. And he goes, and I was like, I'll just send him a message, kind of talk shop with him. He's like, no, you need to talk to him in person. And it was at that moment where I realized I'm like, I have a decision right here and right now I need to make. I can either keep going straight back to Utah and try and figure all this out on my own, or I can get off the next off ramp, circle back, go back to this building and go see if I can get a job at this company, to help kind of grow what I was trying to learn there. So I was like, you know what, screw it, let's do it. So I flipped around on the freeway, went all the way back, walked in the building. I was like, hey, I'm here to see Michael. Michael comes up. He's like, do I know you? And I'm like, yeah, look, I'm looking for a job. So I went back, we kind of talked, and long story short, he's like, okay, I'll let you know. So I was driving back to Utah, and then he calls me and he goes, hey man, I want to bring you on, but I need you here within a week. And I'm like, oh shit. Okay. So I called my mom, called my family. I'm like, hey, I'm moving to Arizona. And they're like, cool, when are you going to go? And I was like, literally, I got to move in like 3 days. So I went home, packed up everything, moved to Arizona, and started working for Techademics, selling like e-commerce education. From there, just kind of fast forward the story a little bit because it can be a little bit prolonged. But after working at that company, I then started to go to these networking events at the Marketers Mansion and met up with Jonathan Foltz, who's running a very, very successful jewelry company. And from there, I started transitioning to, I asked him if he'd allow me to come onto his company and kind of work under him as an internship. And he brought me on. And then from there, I was able to quit my job at Techademics and work for him full time, helping him grow and scale his jewelry company. And he allowed me to help like build out the site, build out the email flows, run Facebook ads. I think I spent over $2 million in Facebook ads the entire time that I was working with him. So I got to learn marketing through experience and under a very successful mentor. Fast forward to that point, I got to a point where I felt like my skill set could kind of take me out on my own. So I left Jonathan and I started working with a new business partner. His name was Ben Malol. He was a very, very, very successful internet marketing entrepreneur. He had one of the first ever courses that came out on how to run Facebook ads. So I started working with him. We started doing like affiliate stuff. We started our own jewelry store, which took off and went very well. We did a marketing agency. We worked with a bunch of clients. We did some coaching groups. Everything was all cool. We traveled the world, kind of living that laptop lifestyle. And it was awesome. And then it got to a point one day where the only thing that we were kind of working on anymore was our jewelry store. And we're just like, bro, I don't want to do this anymore. Like I'm like, selling women's jewelry is just not my passion. You know what I mean? So yeah. At that time, we both agreed to close the business and kind of part ways. And he felt like he wanted to go another route. I felt like I wanted to go a different route. So we're like, cool, respectfully, like, let's shut down the business, part ways, do whatever you want. And at that time, I remember it very, very, very distinctively because I was very lost. I'm like, what am I going to do again? I'm like, I have all these skill sets. I need to figure out what to do. Our lease was about to end in Arizona at that time. And so I was like, okay, I'll probably move back to Utah because that's where my stomping grounds are. That's where, the majority of my network is. I can probably, if I need to make something happen, my odds increase tremendously if I come back to Utah where I grew up. And on top of that time, so he closed the business. And I was also dating this girl at this time. And I found out that she was actually cheating on me and got pregnant with another dude. So broke up with her, broke the lease, pretty much tore down the business, moved back to Utah and hit a huge reset button on life. From there, I started doing some marketing agency stuff, helping people build their websites, do some internet marketing coaching, everything like that. And I just it was really, really weird because the whole time I was there, I just had this voice in my head that said, hey, reach out to Sean and ask him what he would do if he had to hit a reset button on his life. And I know that's what he's done. At that point, I was in Sean's coaching group, The Lion's Den, for about 3 years. And so at that point, I was like, okay, screw it. It was like a month went by and I just could not get this voice out of my head. So I reached out to him. I was like, yo, here's what happened. I explained the whole story. I was like, what would you do if you're in my position where you had to reset everything? And he's like, well, what are you good at? And I was like, okay, that's, not really the response I was looking for, but I was like, I'm good at internet marketing and building e-commerce companies. And he's like, cool, let's meet. And I was like, all right. So I started kind of doing some more research and I was like, well, if he wants to meet, there's probably